we'll give you a reintroduction. I'm Luke. I'm from Hyve Managed Hosting. We're a global hosting provider. I'm the senior cloud consultant within our UK office. My job entails speaking to a lot of customers coming to us with their demands, needs, concerns over the current infrastructure, which sort of puts me well placed to discuss this topic. So is federation the future of cloud? So a bit of an overview of what we'll be going through today. Firstly, and a good place to start, what is federated cloud and some of the differences that are out there between multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. Things to consider before adoption with working with federated cloud, some of the benefits, real-world application, and then moving on to some summaries and if this is the future of cloud and how it's typically used across multiple different industries. So, firstly, what is it? Federated cloud, described as cloud of clouds, and there are many different forms of cloud infrastructure out there that go under different titles. But essentially, it's the unification of a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud environment where they become interoperable. Utilizing APIs and protocols for seamless data transfer and translation between multiple different clouds. Now, from a high level, some of the benefits, as you can see at the bottom there, are enhanced flexibility, potentially utilizing the best of breed from different providers and their offerings. Cost efficiency. So if you have an interoperable cloud that can be deployed in multiple geographical locations, maybe one is better priced in one area than another, and that gives you that increased agility to utilize everything that's at your hands there with the providers that you're using, be it the obvious, the Azures, the AWS, or an MSP like our public cloud, for instance. It can offer enhanced security, and this will all come down to correct management, as we'll discuss, with the considerations of adoption. And then a greater disaster recovery offering, again, if managed correctly, across multiple different clouds. So the differences between multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, well, let's break down each of them firstly. So multi-cloud, typically without integration, but across your big ones, your AWSs, your Azures, and then onto an MSP's cloud. Again, they're not interconnected, so therefore aren't talking to each other, but rather separate instances that you're utilizing. And a lot of companies will already be using this. If you have one sort of cloud offering, be it Azure or AWS, you could be using something else without even having clock. So Microsoft 365 being a good example of that, utilizing that cloud-based offering. And then multi-cloud combines on-premise and public clouds, and again, lacks that interoperability between them. Whereas a federated cloud becomes a single unified system that's sharing resources across one platform, managed in one place. I'd say to make it a little bit easier, but that's far from the truth, but the benefits can be very, very good if it's all put in place correctly. It also helps maximize your scalability and flexibility options there. So how does federated cloud assist or place itself within today's cloud market? Well, as we experience here with inquiries that are coming in and discussions that we have, there is a growing need for flexibility, and a federated cloud would offer that. Again, going back to potentially being able to use and utilize a particular platform's strengths over another. A good example of this could potentially be Azure's SQL offering or Amazon's EKS offering. And that can really help with strategizing future growth and cost management. We can also look at ensuring regulatory and what have you around a compliance piece. So as that gets tighter as we move forward, and probably quite rightly around data privacy laws, GDPR, it can really help having a federated cloud, especially if you're a global company, being able to deploy services appropriately and keeping data where it should be on a global scale, and ticking all of those important boxes, not just for you, but for your customers, from a compliance perspective. It can also offer enhanced security and redundancy. So redundancy being two VMs, let's say, spread across multiple platforms, able to fail over to one another. So not only do you have potentially HA built into the platform with one provider, but should that one provider go down, you've also got that seamless integration with another platform ready to take over should the worst happen and take on the extended load as a result. And with that, as long as the correct protocols are put in place, enhance the security footprint of your cloud infrastructure. And then gaining a competitive advantage, having that utilization of being able to mix the clouds and again, utilize what is best for that particular workload that you have, can give you quite the competitive advantage, and even, again, go into a bit of a cost efficiency area, where someone may be better priced from a bandwidth or a resource perspective in certain geographical locations. Excuse me if I get my header out of the way. So considerations to be made when working with federated cloud. What architectural requirements? There's going to be a need for seamless API integration, for these clouds to be able to talk to each other, understand their own language, from data to applications across these clouds and different data formats, and being able to actually work together to achieve this perfect goal of utilizing everything that can be at your fingertips across different cloud providers. Considering using containerization for the ease and portability of deploying your services across these clouds, and again, utilizing service wraps that could be on offer. As I said earlier, AWS's EKS service would come up here, no doubt, should that be a provider that you're looking to go down. And data integration. So real-time translation, as I was mentioning earlier, and making sure that these VMs, these cloud-based deployments can see each other, speak to each other, and work with each other seamlessly. And there are tools out there, but also considering that your data, of course, will have gravity. The more data you have in one area, will attract applications and services, which will only end up growing that data as well, which could then lead to certain issues with vendor lock-in, that difficulty of moving that data away from that area. Monitoring and resilience, so having the right tools in place to make sure that everything that you need this federated cloud to do, so that seamless failover and load balanced, high availability, beautiful setup, actually does what it needs to for you, and have the capability to monitor it effectively, make sure that you can see what's going on with this infrastructure. Is it powered enough? Do we need some attention there? So being able to do that on the fly and keep a good eye on keeping everything exactly where it should be from your day-to-day use. And then, of course, again, as with everything IT, security and compliance, from data sovereignty and where the data is to be held, especially for people within healthcare or financial services, where it's particularly key, through to identity and access management across multiple clouds, and making sure the correct rules, processes, procedures, and access management is put in place for your IT leaders to your first, second, and third line, and what they can do, and making sure that's seamlessly put across these multiple providers. And then encryption, and making sure that consistent standards are put across everywhere, from what it is to where you hold your keys and how they're managed and where. These are all sort of key considerations that we would be discussing if someone wanted to entertain moving to a federated cloud approach. So what are the real world applications here of a federated cloud? Now, you can go through these one by one. I can read it word for word, and I'm the last I'm the last speaker of this event, from what I understand, so I don't want to send anyone to sleep too early. But they all share similar traits in that they all have a growing need. They're made up of many different facets, sectors, departments, etc., from healthcare to financial services, as we've already mentioned, but manufacturing and energy. And being able to have a federated cloud where all of this is kept under one roof is really well applied. And I'd say it's some of the really good examples of where federated cloud and having that unification can really assist not just with management, but bang for buck and getting everything that you want out of a cloud-based deployment. These industries will utilize that no end, and we see them moving over to that. Maybe not absolutely everything, but some of the core services can be put into a federated cloud and managed centrally. So the challenges of adoption. So with such a vast topic and all these different options that are available to everyone out there, and there is only a growing amount of available services out there, this comes with the complexity of taking what you have now and then putting it across multiple clouds that are interconnected. It sounds like the dream, and it is the dream, but it's not straightforward. Of course, there needs to be skilled personnel behind all of this to make sure that it can happen. They understand what it is that is needed and the tools that are in place and how they work and what's used. And there can be barriers put in place with proprietary APIs and data formats across all of these providers, which can then lead, unfortunately, to a little bit of vendor lock-in and cost management. So having the tools in place, so knowing that if there are cost differences in different locations with different providers, that you're able to stay on top of that and actually utilize it. It's all great having a federated cloud where you can do it, but actually doing it can then become the hard part. So making sure that that's tracked and optimized at all times to make sure that you're not overspending where it's not necessary. And standardization issues could also cause compatibility challenges across providers, as we've discussed, and making sure that that's set up so these services can fluently speak and understand each other at the cost of a little bit of increased resource, as we'll see in a second. And then security risks that can pose themselves there if they're not managed correctly. So having multiple clouds and ensuring that they are looked after and protected via endpoint and your own policies across these different platforms. So ensuring that everything is the same and that one doesn't have a vulnerability that the other didn't, and keeping on top of that and ensuring that there are no gaps. So as a bit of an early summary, we suggest that the management is the key to unlocking the value behind a federated cloud. So audit and strategy, meaning what have you got now? And what is it you're going to be pushing on to in the future? So this could be a company with large ideas about future projects, and these future projects have specific demands from their workload that may be better placed in one area to another. And that could be from a geographical sense or a technical sense. And then resource and cost optimization, which then feeds nicely into that. So, where is this going to be best placed? And who is on top of where these are going to be placed, and who's keeping up to speed with all of this and the information that's out there, and then the services as they grow. Performance monitoring, so having that eye on what you have running and what happens if a particular VM, for instance, is running a bit low on resource, or there's suddenly a demand. An e-commerce platform, for instance, marketing doesn't talk to sales, and a big marketing campaign goes out and no one else knows about it, but all of a sudden there's a huge amount of traffic coming in. Are you able to monitor the platform and react as soon as you need to avoid any sort of unneeded or unnecessary downtime? And then, of course, the integration, interoperability of those clouds, and making sure that they are seamless across and the management is there. And declarative and imperative deployments through the likes of Terraform, having an idea of what you want to deploy and how, and the effects of that will be absolutely key. And something that I'm well versed to discuss is potential expertise and assistance from an MSP. So if you have these desires and requirements and can see a huge benefit that federated cloud would give you, perhaps you need a little bit of assistance from an MSP. And then how do you pick that MSP? And what questions are you going to ask them? And how are they going to prove to you that they are the right people for you? Have they listened and understood? And that's something we take very seriously here, just as an example, understanding our clients' requirements. No two clients generally are ever the same. So making sure that you get everything out there and that the MSP that you are choosing understands fully, what is required from them and from your services that you wish to deploy with their management over the top. So the future of federated cloud. The global hybrid cloud market is projected to reach 414 billion by 2032. So there is always a trend towards a more flexible infrastructure, and everyone wanting the best of everything, and no one provider can generally give you the best of everything and tick every single box. So there is a push towards utilizing the best of what's out there, and what's the most effective way of doing it. I would say easier, but I don't think there's any sort of easy way to do it. There's always going to be some complexity behind it. Whereas a federated cloud can help capitalize on these demands. And that's what's sort of seen a push towards this. With advancing technologies, we can see that everything's getting better. And whilst it will never be simple, there are tools and technology out there that makes this an easier prospect, again, with the correct planning out there. There's obviously going to be a huge focus on compliance, especially with the customers that we speak to and clients that we have conversations with, ensuring that we're able to meet their compliance demands and understanding them and putting their services in the right places with the right processes in place to ensure that they tick all the boxes for their customers and them. And an edge's computing role, so using a federated cloud to be able to push these services to IoT devices, for instance, from your mobile phone to your Tesla. So we see the future sort of laying in that sort of area. So is federation the future of cloud? Well, cloud federation isn't a particularly new topic. It's been around for at least a decade, but it's sort of reshaped itself to the current demands that are out there. So as we've seen, it places itself very well in some areas, healthcare, manufacturing, energy sector, that sort of areas. And I would say for certain industries and sectors, it certainly is, but possibly not for everyone. And that could be from a technical or a commercial point of view, and whether it's affordable, whether it's necessary, maybe it's a bit overkill. Maybe what you have can sit with one provider that's got the correct process and HA and uptime SLAs and what have you, and you cover from that perspective. But from what I've seen, I would certainly say that there is a future there, especially if it's more attainable for the mid-level, let's say, to have this sort of deployment or infrastructure available to them in a way that can be managed maybe a little bit easier. It's quite a tough question to answer, but I would say certainly for the right people and for the right companies and industries. And that, although maybe a bit brief.
Oh, no, I've got a couple of follow-up questions, but thank you so much, Nick. That was really interesting. Thanks for joining us today and giving your insight onto that. I'm going to hop right over to questions if I can.
Absolutely.
Considering the need for vendor agnostic solutions in federated clouds, how do you suggest we avoid vendor lock-in while ensuring interoperability across different cloud providers?
It's tricky. It depends who you're with. So, for instance, we have a lot of customers utilize our knowledge and capability to investigate it further, but staying on top of trends and understanding what's out there will give you that advantage and allow you to plan forward to try and avoid that sort of vendor lock-in. It's tricky. It's not easy. And as I said, with the data gravity, you can very easily find yourself locked into a particular provider should that data grow and then become almost impossible to move. So yes, trying to stay ahead of a trend that's out there is what I would recommend.
Again, another sort of difficult question considering the obviously recent Trump election and the various things going on in the geopolitical world. In terms of data sovereignty, so what do organizations who are operating across multiple countries and regions, what do they really have to be aware of, and how can a federated cloud sort of help them navigate that minefield of data and regulation and data protection?
Well, it's sort of fed to us a lot of the times from our customers coming in. So we simply listen and react, and they are the masters of their own compliance and the needs that they need to meet. And then we have our compliance team that will work with them so that we end up in that definitive solution that ticks every box that is sort of fed to us. So unfortunately, it's difficult for me to comment because we sort of do the needful to get them in their place. But if I was to give a compliance team some advice, again, stay informed and make sure those. We do offer assistance whereby we have a data center in Singapore, and we understand some of the complexities around GDPR or not, because it can be rather similar. So we can offer our advice and assist, but generally the people that we're speaking to have an idea. And it might be that we speak to an IT manager first, and then we speak to a compliance officer and who else needs to be involved. But it's generally fed to us, and we assist with our experiences from other customers as we grow.
So it's a lot of keeping your ear to the ground and sharing information to make sure you're getting the right thing. So as federated clouds evolve, how do you see this impacting the competitive landscape of cloud service providers and their relationship with organizations?
That's a good question. From a competitive standpoint, it could help. So for someone like us, or just an MSP in general, I don't want to ram Hyve down anyone's throat. But someone realizing that a federated cloud might be good for them, and they already are in an Azure house, for instance, or one of the big hyperscalers, branching out and using an MSP. Because they need to make that federated cloud a thing. It could be good for the average MSP gaining business whereby they wouldn't have had it before, because federated cloud has now become a topic of conversation within that company, for instance. So it could be a really good thing. Or you could just see a dominance from the big hyperscalers and people failing over between them because all the tools and APIs, what have you, are geared towards that because there's more demand for that. I honestly don't know. It's very much a case of having to wait and see, and we hope we get to get involved in it as much as we possibly can.
Thank you. And then just one more. In terms of cost management and cost management strategies, specifically for organizations seeking to optimize sort of their cloud expenditures across multiple providers, what's the benefit of a federated? I know you touched on this, but what would be the benefits and what should people be looking out for?
Well, it should be conversing. So again, if you're going away from the hyperscalers and you're speaking to an MSP, and an MSP may have a greater idea or ability to search the landscape for specific services and the costings of them, whether they sit best on their own infrastructure or on the likes of your GCP and AWS, for example. So staying up to date, as with anything within IT, you leave it a year and you've been left a mile, but trying to keep yourself up to date in some fashion and utilize the assistance that's out there to stay on top of what is where and how much it costs and who's at this and who's at that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today, Luke. That was fantastic and a really great way to round out the day. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you ever so much.